All right, welcome everyone to the Essentials in Building a Successful Remote Esports Program webinar. My name is Eric Peterson and I'm an account executive for Trox here in Phoenix. I'm also a former teacher and a school district IT technician, as well as a lifelong gamer and a retro gaming podcast host myself. So I'm extremely excited to be able to sit here and talk about video games with everybody today, but more importantly, how they can play a role in education. Having personally grown up surrounded by video games, I've seen the growth from an after-school hobby to a legitimate career firsthand, but to many, esports is uncharted territory. The concept of video games as a major sporting event might be shocking to some, but according to a 2019 survey published by eMarketer, almost 1 in 4 people have watched an esports tournament in some fashion recently. And there are about 46 million people in the US who are projected to be esports viewers by 2023. This is going to be more than a 50% increase from 2019. And these numbers, while they're large on their own, are even more impressive on a global scale. This past year, 495 million people watched esports in some form, which is well beyond the 2.5 million who are watching Major League Baseball or the 15.2 million who are watching the National Football League telecast. So to say that esports is here to stay is putting it lightly, and naturally schools are going to take an interest in something quite far-reaching. So today we're going to spend a bit of time talking with a few industry professionals about how to research and support your esports agenda, how to create goals that validate your program investment, and how to evaluate the tools and technology that you need to run those programs. We do have some predetermined questions lined up that we're going to ask each of the panelists, but please note that there will be about 10 minutes at the end of the panel for a live Q&A. So if you have any questions, please submit them via the Zoom's Q&A feature. But before we get started, I want to take a minute to let each of our panelists introduce themselves. First up, we have Joshua Kell from Horizon AVL.
Hi guys, how are you? My name is Joshua Kell. I am the CEO of Horizon AVL and Esports Integration. We are a 40-year-old AV integration firm that have been designing television studios, arenas, large group instruction in the education space, classroom technology. We've been working with Trox for over 20 years now as one of their integration partners. And several years ago, we decided to build a whole division around the esports industry, taking that 40 years of knowledge, but then also bringing other aspects of the industry and really focusing on the curriculum and education aspect. So that's a little brief introduction of myself and the company.
Perfect. Thanks, Josh. Next, we have Ryan Shuttlesworth from Asus.
Hey everyone, my name is Ryan Shuttlesworth. I'm the National Esports BDM for Asus's gaming lineup, which is Republic of Gamers. Former educator, tech enthusiast, hoping to have a good show today.
Thanks, Josh. Next, we have Ryan. I'm sorry, Ryan, thank you. Next, we have Eric Ackerson from Acer.
Hey everybody, I'm Eric Ackerson, Senior Product Marketing and Brand Manager for Acer. I'm an early adopter and enthusiast. I got into PC hardware many years ago, trying to get an edge on my friends playing games. I needed to build systems and make them faster and overclock just so I could try and compete with my buddies. It never worked, but I did learn about hardware. And from there, I've gone into this industry and having a heck of a lot of fun. Acer makes computer systems and other consumer goods to help bring technology to everyone. And we've been partnering with or focusing on education and esports for a little while now.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. I think we're going to have a great little discussion here. We do have some questions lined up, but want to start getting into it. So we touched a little bit on the prevalence of esports a couple minutes ago, but I want to dive a bit deeper into what exactly esports is, because in the gaming world, for us gamers, esports has been around for quite a while now, but as a mainstream source of entertainment, it's just starting to take a more prominent role. As such, schools are starting to become more interested and they themselves are wanting to get involved. But before we can begin to really understand the benefits of esports or even how to flesh out one of those programs, I think we need to kind of explore the emerging area itself. So this first question is for Josh. For those who may just be dipping their toes into the esports waters for the first time, it might be helpful just to know in a very general sense, what is esports?
Sure. So the easiest definition and the simplest definition is competitive video game play, right? Where whether it's teams or individuals are strategizing and working together within that particular game, and to compete in that game against an opponent, another team. We have several different analogies of what esports looks like, especially compared to traditional sports, right? And the other thing is that we often find that individuals confuse gaming with esports. And so that definition is always good to sort of talk through what the difference is. So let me put it in a traditional sports metaphor, right? So basketball, right? The game of basketball is there's a set of rules. The ball's a certain size, the net's a certain height. All of that is standard set of rules, no matter how you play. If you go to your local recreation center and play with friends, that is what we look at as gaming, right? Video game play. But when you look at the NBA is still basketball. The rules are still the same. The basketball net's the same height. The ball size is still the same. Everything is still the same. But now you have a competitive side where you have teams that are organized, that are working together to strategize for that end result, right, in that particular game. So when you're looking at esports is that competitive side of video game play.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest confusions right now that a lot of people have when dipping into esports. It's like, well, the kids are just going to be playing video games in school and they already play enough of it at home as it is. So I think kind of tying in that analogy with traditional sports is extremely important for people to kind of get a little bit of an understanding of what that is, because sports themselves, basketball, baseball, football, soccer, have been a mainstay of education for generations. And
Sure.
video games themselves have just been viewed as that hobby, something you come home, you just relax. We've been fortunate to grow up in the era of online gaming, so we can play with friends who aren't exactly sitting on the couch, which, sometimes that's a little bit more fun. But I want to ask Eric, how do you think esports can be beneficial within the school setting? And what do you think is the biggest stigma to overcome? Because let's face it, not everybody views gaming as a legitimate, worthwhile use of time.
Yeah, certainly true. Let me start with the second part of that question first.
Sure.
The stigma. I think first and foremost, there's the perception that being involved in gaming and esports is a waste of time, that it's distracting from other uses of that time, whether it be studying or being social in a more traditional physical sport. So that's something that's difficult to overcome, but it happens pretty fast. There are lots of stories about that, but how can it be beneficial? Just like a physical sport or a club or a drama or band, things like that, there are quite a few things about esports in the school setting that can help and be beneficial. Teamwork, leadership, communication, as well as learning skills for next level education and the careers down the line. How are you going to do a job without knowing how to run a PC or to solve problems on a PC? In some cases, you're building and maintaining PCs, you're running networks to keep those PCs connected, as well as being able to package the content that has been generated, I should say, and being able to broadcast it. Video editing, podcasting, streamcasting, all of this. But probably the most important one really is for the psyche of the kids involved is finding their own tribe, being accepted and not being ostracized. And while esports has become much more acceptable to the mainstream, what I mean is they're just finding other people with similar interests and feeling comfortable with them.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, is that it's a little bit more all-encompassing. Whereas traditional sports like basketball and such, if you're not good at that sport, you can't really play. I mean, you can maybe be a manager for the team or be the person that hands out water, but esports, it sounds like there's so much more to it than being the one behind the keyboard actually playing the game. And that's really all encompassing within schools, is you're creating a program that can cater to not only a wider group of students, but you can also provide a wider array of skills for them to carry forward. which is huge. So Ryan, I want to ask you the next question. So for schools that are getting interested in starting an esports program, or even expanding on one that they've already maybe set up as sort of a club, it's important that they do their research and support that program in the best way possible, because as we all know, budgets are tight and people want to make sure that they're getting their best return on investment. So can you provide us with some important factors to consider should they be looking to actually create a plan or expand upon a current one?
Sure. I mean, just with esports, just like anything else, the first thing you need to ask yourself is why. Why do you want to start a program? Why do you want to expand the program? What's the intent, right? As we look at esports across the category, every institution has a different answer. But I think the most common reasons that we see are retention or building a community, just like Eric put it. We see that a lot of schools want to incorporate some kind of curriculum, or incorporate some kind of STEM or CTE program, or simply put, some schools just want to increase their income, and that could look like something like a magnet school or a private school trying to increase their tuition rate. And for the sake of not giving you a 30-minute answer and exploring the question, right? Um, the reasons that the reasons for the program are really, really important, and driving right into that to find out why you want to start the program, probably the most important thing that you're going to do as you build that out. So explore those reasons, poll your students, find out their level of intent and engagement, find a responsible GM and a coach, and then have fun with it. As your students get more involved, you want to consider things like, what games do you want to play? If you want to be competitive, if you want to be casual, and then you'll want to get into the more finite details of their program. Like, if you want to play competitively in a league, what league are you going to play in? And if you want to build a curriculum that involves esports, what other clubs can you partner with? Are you going to treat this as an academic program or a traditional sport? And I'm sure your board will help you clarify the difference in what budgets they're going to provide through that response, right? But all joking aside, there's a lot of things to consider. But again, start simple. Decide where you want to start your program, or why you want to expand your program. Lay out some goals that incorporate those reasons, and then work with your students to make a progression chart. The more specific you are, the better. Uh, what I mean to say here is that if you want to build an esports team, because let's say you want to involve your community, how do you want to engage your community? How do you want to involve that community of students or parents or faculty? Maybe one of your goals is to get 1,000 views on a single video. Who's going to manage the platform? What platform are you going to use? Do you need to teach your students video editor or creator? Do they know how to do clips or transitions? Do you need to do voiceovers? I mean, there's a lot of things that you can really get involved in, and a lot of things that you can stack up for progression goals, but you have to celebrate those goals. Tell your students that what they're doing is important, and motivate them towards the final goal, whatever that might be. And regardless if you make it or not, you can validate that investment in time, energy spent on the goal by your students and the faculty, and how many students you've engaged with, and how many students are better off from having the program. Just like Eric said, I mean, students have got to find a tribe, and they've got to find a place within the institution that they're currently engaging in.
I think that's really important, that singular question of why, because I've spent quite a bit of time with my customers who call me up and say, "Hey, we want to start an esports program. What do we do?" And the first question is obviously, well, why, and what do you want to accomplish with it? And so often I get the response of, well, everybody else is doing it. And they don't really have that predefined notion of where they want to go and what they want to accomplish with it. So I think that's extremely important, is lay out your path forward first. So once you kind of have that down, then it kind of starts to get down to the nitty gritty of, okay, well, what does it actually take to do this? Because as we've talked about, it's not just sitting down and playing video games. Well, yes, that is a huge part of it. And I wish that was a part of school when I was growing up, but at least I can be on this side of it and help out from this end. But we know that esports can be effective within education. But we need to look at what goes into that. So very similar to traditional sports that need basketballs, footballs, running shoes, whatever that particular sport might be, esports itself does require a very specific set of equipment. So Eric, could you touch on some of the very basic common elements that are needed to create a program? And if you could, in a ballpark sense, some of those estimated costs or barriers to entry.
Sure. So I really like the example Josh gave about kind of a standardized playing field and equipment, for instance, with basketball that, um, if you just want to grab a couple friends and go to the local park and shoot some hoops and play a competitive pickup game, you can do that at a relatively low cost, right? But if you want to get into performing at an NBA level and maybe using auto sports and driving as another example, you can race with a Toyota Tercel, but you're not going to compete well against somebody with a $1 million dedicated sports car. So there isn't a difference in equipment. The good news is that because there's such a range of games to be played and levels of skill, there are different types of equipment that schools could invest in and gradually work up. Depending on how you define it, you could play with gaming consoles like a Nintendo Switch or Xbox or PlayStation, and that could be considered esports because it brings in a lot of these benefits that I mentioned earlier. On a more, I don't know, everyday level, I think the PC is the backbone of what we're talking about here. And again, it depends on the type of game that the students are going to be participating in, what level of hardware you're going to need. But CPU and graphics are a big part of that in terms of the level of performance needed for certain games and to provide the best experience possible. And then when you look at what else the systems might be used, so overall a desktop system and monitor, keyboard, mouse, maybe a headset like I'm wearing and a couple others are wearing, could also be played on a laptop, but generally want to connect to a larger display, which you could do with a laptop, but then you purchase two displays, so there's no need. Also, the benefit of a desktop is you can upgrade over time. It has some better cooling options because there's more space, and students can learn about managing the hardware that way. As far as pricing, again, budget, but that's where some games can be played as well, because the systems can be for more than esports. They can be used in other programs in the school for science and for the whole computer program and things like that. So there's different ways to do that, but I don't know, $1,000 per system kind of as a baseline. You could probably even go down from that, but I'm trying to include everything necessary.
Yeah, and I think that's you bring up a really good point. Being a PC building enthusiast myself, I understand that can get out of control very, very, very quickly. But computers, when you start talking to somebody about building a computer, they more often than not their eyes are going to glaze over because for them it's like this is daunting. You may as well ask me to build a car. I don't know what I'm doing, but at its very basic concept, like you said, it's your tower, your graphics card, your processor, RAM, monitor, keyboard, mouse. But my next question for Josh, we all know that budgets within school districts can range wildly from district to district, even within school to school within the same district. And like I said, anyone into PC gaming can attest that stuff can come with a really decent price tag. I mean, you can get just a generic entry-level desktop computer or a full-on custom-built, water-cooled, overclocked CPU with 20 graphics cards and enough RAM to open 1,000 Chrome tabs.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier, Josh, that within regular sports, there's a predefined set of rules: size of the basketball, size of the rim, size of the court, so on. How is the playing field within esports leveled for those schools or programs that may not have the funding to afford all of the best top-of-the-line equipment?
Yeah. So, and that's something, I think you have to go back to the why on first. Why are you bringing in esports? And I normally what we find with most schools is they ask the question why, and they actually can't even answer it, and so, because they don't know what they don't know, they don't understand the rule sets and the level playing field and what all that looks like. They just say, oh, you need a computer. Well, we have a computer lab, so why don't you just go down there and start utilizing it? And I think it's education from that standpoint. We have to start before they can answer the why, before they can say, well, this is why we want to do it. It has to be determined. Well, this is really the direction, and this is really what the industry looks like. This is the career path opportunities that are out there, and here are the standardizations of how you play in the game itself. You know, if you have a particular piece of computer hardware now and you drop I don't know, we'll say, well, League of Legends you can run off of a toaster, but if you have something a little bit more graphic intensive, you know, that's going to actually give your students a competitive disadvantage. And so when we're looking at these opportunities, when we talk and vet through the process of hardware and building a team and building a league and competing and looking at curriculum, we actually say, well, what is the benefit to the student? Because, you know, we have sports programs that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of building a football stadium, if not, you know, millions, depending on where you are in the country of how important football is. And so, you know, the cost of entry into esports is much lower. But I think the question sort of needs to be directed in such a way that says, well, how are we giving our students the best competitive advantage, and not an advantage over another team, but at least a level playing field, right? So games typically from the manufacturers, from the software developers, they will offer, you know, minimum and recommended, right? So normally what we do in our process when we're talking to a school is we will go through at least determining what games that you're going to be playing. That's step one, because then that's going to sort of determine a whole host of factors from that standpoint. And then what we do is once we've determined the game, then we say, okay, really, we understand how school budgets work. We understand, you know, in the next, you know, 2 to 3 years, you're not going to be purchasing another PC. It's not like you can cycle that every year. So we're going to want to maybe up the specs a bit because, you know, games come out and they are going to utilize, you know, graphics card advantages, and like the new RTX, the NVIDIA RTX, you know, 3000 series, the 30 series. There's things and features in that graphics card that a lot of software developers have not even really potentially utilized in that. So, and I'm not saying to go out and buy a bunch of RTX 30s, but they're great cards and all. But, you know, obviously that there's a budget in mind. But that needs to be determined. I think there's a whole host of questions that need to be sort of asked from someone that does that, right? That's what we do, right? We go through the process and sit a school down, and they say, why do we get into esports? I give them the broad picture of every aspect of the industry. We say, here's the competitive nature. Here's the curriculum side that we've developed. Here is the physical space of what it may look like, and then we start specifying hardware and what that looks like to fit then the mold, and then not to get them in at, you know, at such a low entry level machine that they can't even compete properly. So that's normally the process and how we view the hardware perspective.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. I think definitely laying out what they want to be playing first. Would you say that it's if somebody wants to get the most bang for their buck in a competitive sense, would you ever recommend somebody look more towards esports on consoles versus on PC, or would you recommend pushing them towards PC because it ties in more aspects of education, you know, from broadcasting and all of that?
Definitely PC overall, all around, right? And even to Eric's point, you know, most competitive video game at the highest level, if we once again reference the NBA at that highest level, is all PC majority, right? I mean, there is a lot in Super Smash and Nintendo Switch, and those consoles, right? But when you look at the majority of the leagues, right, Overwatch League or League of Legends, right, you look at these larger leagues, Rocket League, most of that is being played on a PC. That does give you the benefit of developing more in the program side of utilizing that hardware. So when a school typically starts out in the esports realm, normally they start out as a club, right? So by day, this is how we sort of we kind of get started before we get into curriculum and before we get into utilizing the machine in multiple levels of curriculum. What we basically say is it's an investment that you need to make. By day, it serves a purpose. That purpose can be graphic design, AutoCAD. It can be even for content creation, and it can be used for coding, science, as Eric had pointed out. So by day, it functions as one thing, but by night, the club aspect, the esports competition side, because really when we think of traditional sports in schools, you're not playing technically, you're not practicing football, and you're not doing your drills and everything in football at 10 o'clock in the morning. You're waiting till after school. So the esports club and the team, and if they get to varsity status and they want to hold that, they practice in the evening. So now that machine is technically free because now that machine was used as a classroom aid during the day, and then by night it functions as another thing. And we talk through, potentially partitioning the hard drive or having two hard drives that are one dedicated to school, one dedicated esports, so the two will never meet. And there's all kinds of discussions of what the best practice is for your particular institution.
Yeah, and this may be a kind of going off a little bit on this, but in regard to that, with my customers in the past 3 to 5 years, I've seen a lot of them gutting their computer labs and turning them back into traditional classrooms. And now everybody's saying, well, wait, we want to have an esports program, so now we need a computer lab again, but we now don't have the space. Are you coming across that? And how are you, I mean, I guess Eric and Ryan as well, are you coming across that, and how are you addressing that?
Well, I mean, we do see it a lot, right? What that looks like, and we try to once again pivot it as a multi-purpose space, and try to convert, or at least try to utilize labs that would still need to utilize massive amount of computers, like AutoCAD or graphic design. Like, can we kind of combine that together? Because those, for them to completely go away is very difficult, because then the students don't even have a computer to work on. So that's we try to we try to navigate it through the process and through the door of saying, well, let's actually look at spaces that you have. A lot of them are actually putting them in like the media centers or the libraries, because people are removing books. So some of that space is starting to open up from that standpoint. So,
gotcha. Yeah, with all the equipment out there, choosing even the most basic elements, it can be pretty daunting. But thankfully, Trox, we do have excellent partnerships with both Asus and Acer. So I want to start with Ryan. What type of technology does Asus offer to support esports within schools?
Right. So, I mean, to answer this question, it's really relevant to tell you who Asus is. Asus, for all intents and purposes, is one of the world's largest motherboard and component brands. We design and manufacture all of our own equipment from the ground up, which is something that not a lot of brands out there can still say. In the case of our esports equipment, it's built for gamers. It's built for gamers, and it's designed by engineers who just so happen to be gamers themselves. Um, we're an industry leader in innovative technology, and we're frequently first to market with a lot of new tech, like our GX 700, that was the first liquid cooled laptop in mass production, or the ROG Swift that came out 2 months ago. It's the first 360 hertz monitor on the consumer market. And we have two brands within the space. The first is Republic of Gamers. That's our best and our highest end. And then we also have our Tough brand, which is a more recent brand, but designed for budget gamers in mind. We carry everything from Laptop Magazine's #1 laptop this year to desktops, servers, routers, mice, keyboards, monitors. I mean, you name it, we have it, and we make the components as well. So, I mean, if you need motherboards or graphics cards, if you want to build your own solutions, we have those. And I mean, we do a lot of these offerings in bundles, or we pack them individually. And we recently announced a partnership with IKEA for furniture. So I mean, there's not really a lot of the space that we don't specifically touch for esports. I mean, ROG is one of the most storied brands in esports, in the esports market right now. So I mean, it's pretty safe to say if you want esports equipment, we've got it for you.
Eric, same question to you. What offerings from Acer do you have to support esports within schools?
So Acer does not have the storied past of Ryan and Asus. Kudos to them for having done such a good job for so long. Our entry into gaming and esports is relatively new. Having played in it years ago with our Gateway brand, that kind of, well, it's went away for the most part. We're 5 years into this, and we've differentiated our product lineup under two brands, Predator and Nitro. And Predator, to use a car comparison, it's kind of like the Chevrolet Corvette, top of the line, high performance. And then Nitro is more like the Camaro, still a pretty darn good performer, but comes in at a much lower price point. And so we have a range of products under both those brands for all of the solutions you would need, laptop or desktop system, for monitors, displays, keyboards, mice, all the peripherals, things like that. And we're offering bundles through Trox, mostly focused on the desktop side of things. Like we talked and discussed as a group before about desktops being more multi-purpose and lasting longer because of being able to upgrade and teaching those skills. So it's more of a focus on the desktops, including a pretty neat do-it-yourself solution that is being brought to market to not just provide the hardware, but then also part of the curriculum is bundled around learning. And like you yourself said, people are oftentimes afraid of hardware. But this allows the students to learn the hardware skills and not be afraid that they don't need to rely on someone else. They can fix and repair and upgrade and gain that confidence and knowledge themselves. So Predator and Nitro and bundles through Trox and other partners is our focus. And then one last thing, really very new for us, is a kind of a community social platform called Planet 9. And this is a way to pair people together with others of similar interest in games and skill level, as well as offer coaching and analytics and statistics, and then even kind of get a play with the pros so you can see how they would do things at certain levels. It's also going to, over time, evolve into a way to host and manage tournaments. And that's something that would probably be helpful for schools that are just getting into this.
Perfect. Yeah, it sounds like between the two of you guys, we've got all of our bases covered.
Do you mind if I add in one thing to what Eric was sort of alluding to? Well, actually two aspects. One, Planet 9, and we get this a lot, right? So we hear from schools, how do we coach? Where do we go through this process? Where does that begin? Because a lot of what's going to happen in schools, and we hear this a lot. Well, we have someone that's going to sort of advise or overlook the course or the class or the club, and they really might not have the esports experience, but these kids want to do it, right? So this concept is it's a great concept in addition to the esports team. It really gives them the ability to get a remote coach for an opportunity. You're training for a particular league season game, and you want to just, the team needs to brush up on their skills. And so there's a lot of opportunity within that. So we're really excited about actually about what that platform looks like. And then the second aspect, and Eric touched on this a little bit with the DIY. The DIY computer goes hand in hand, and I think we're going to talk about curriculum tomorrow a little bit, and what that looks like. So I don't want to give too much away, but we're really excited about what this looks like, because we have developed a full 4-year CTE National Core Standard curriculum, and part of that, and that ranges from everything from content creation, the business of esports, social media, marketing, and also IT. And really, I think everyone on this call, we all got our start in building machines, right? It's what interests us. It's what got us into the space. We wanted to know more about it. And sure, we all went in little different directions, but we feel that DIY and with our curriculum moving together is going to give students an opportunity to actually roll up their sleeves and get their hands on a really great gaming piece of hardware and put those components together firsthand, and then to actually then utilize that for then gaming, or even the other aspects that we talked about earlier, like CAD and graphic design, because the components in that are, I mean, they're really well spec'd out of that DIY. So I just wanted to kind of bring
Perfect,
those two
thank you.
elements. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, as we roll into the end of 2020 here, thank goodness, this past year has definitely been an exercise in flexibility. And with a lot of schools going remote, I'd like to just briefly get an opinion from each of you. How does it you adjust your guidance to schools in the process of building a program while they are remote? And do you see any silver linings in the current climate? So, Josh, I'd like to start with you on that one.
Sure. So esports has been actually technically working remote for the beginning, right? LAN play, remote play. Like if I go back to my college dorm, we played floor to floor, building the building over the LAN, right? So that is still remote. That's remote gameplay. I was in my room, someone else was in their other, and we're competing against each other. And even today, like looking at today, if we take the big stadium concept aside just for a moment, and you look at the core of where esports and gaming is, it's an online community. The majority of this is online. Streaming is online, right? Twitch and YouTube gaming and Facebook gaming, all of these platforms are online. This is where that viewership number that you gave earlier, that's where that's coming from. That's coming from an online presence that exists now. The way that we're operating today, more people are getting more acquainted with cameras and these elements. All of this is in play. So our curriculum on top of that is all geared towards online as well. So online assessments, online exams, online drills, online courses, even the remote aspect of broadcast. We are able to teach these broadcast elements in a remote setting where I can be in front of a camera and a student can be, in the same town, several houses away, and they're doing all the video mixing and calling the shots. And another one can be doing other elements of graphic design for that. So from an esports perspective, we've actually been prepared for this, where there's no difference for us. So, but that physical element of being there, that, obviously that's huge as well. And we're looking forward to everything going back. Students are working together in those spaces again. So.
Perfect. Eric, Ryan, you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think to really echo what Josh has said, I mean, the guidance hasn't so much changed per se, but I think really the big silver lining here is that as we maybe transition away from having those students in school and look at having more mics and cameras and maybe transitioning away from doing more desktops and now starting to do some mobile workstations, those students are starting to take some of their equipment home, which is really great because it's teaching multiple generations about technology and about the category. And in this case, when we have guardians or family members that don't believe in the concept of esports, or that don't believe that their scholar athletes are getting a greater sense of learning through esports, they get to see the competitive play, they get to see the collaboration and the teamwork, or the prep work. And for the athletes, for the students, having somebody that stands behind them is such a positive change and such a positive outlook, not only to esports as a category, but to that student's future.
Yeah, I think Josh and Ryan have really summed it up well. The silver lining here, maybe there are two to add to that or build on. First of all, in this situation, there's a lot of, there either is now or will be soon, budgets and funding given to schools to help them upgrade their systems. And the benefit to that is, like we've talked about, everything will be at a new, higher level starting point instead of working off an old 5-year old machine that can't catch up with today's needs, whether it be for sports or for the education side of things, or all these other ancillary benefits. Now they're at a new standard because there's funding injected to schools to buy the hardware. And like Ryan pointed out, I think it's very key to overcome the objections of the adults in the students' lives about this is a waste of time or it's not good. Like bringing laptops or hardware home, Now they get to see how the student is using it and interacting with people, and how it's more than just games. And so once you've broken down that barrier of a preconceived notion on what esports is, the parents, the adults in the children's lives get much more supportive. And then everybody in that family or that unit grows together.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads really nicely into the next topic we want to talk about is actually the benefits of an esports program. So we know what it is and we know what it takes to get started, some potential costs, but I want to look at some of the benefits that it can provide because educators have known for a while now that taking part in extracurricular activities does boost student success. Um, so Eric, back to you just for a second. What are some of the key benefits to kids being involved in activities like esports leagues?
Yeah, I kind of have already touched on it a couple times, but I'll reinforce it. It's about finding a tribe, gaining confidence. It's finding other people with similar interests, and becoming who you are. The student becomes who they are. If you're an athlete on a football team, whether you're the star quarterback or running back or the guy warming the bench benefits from that camaraderie. I was that guy, I got to tell you. And it made me feel good to be a part of a successful team and to associate with those other people that were doing well. And I learned uh, to play football better and how to work in the team, but it built my confidence kind of more than anything else. And then all the other things we've mentioned before, leadership, because while you may not be the greatest skilled esports player, perhaps you end up being a manager of the team and helping organize events and scheduling practices and learning how to lead the team towards their goals. And communication is a part of that, learning the hardware and the software, how to keep things running, setting up and running a network, all of the broadcasting and packaging of the content, editing. Even mentioned for streaming, I think maybe it was Ryan mentioned this, there are overlays and graphics that have to go on for when you're broadcasting. And so now you're getting perhaps bringing in people from the art side of the curriculum at the school into creating really good graphics on screen for when things are broadcasting. So it's community, it's confidence, it's kind of finding yourself and learning all of these different skills that will help in the future, even if after high school they never play another game again.
Yeah, it's kind of like it requires, yes, you need to be good at playing the game, but that person can't be good at playing the game and put on a successful tournament without everybody else around them. So it is definitely, it takes a village. So while there are benefits to individual students, how about benefits for educational institutions as a whole? So Ryan, what are some of those benefits that a school or an institution could see from an esports program?
Yeah, so I think really what the bigger question is, how do you quantify the success of the program, right? In the business world, that's simple things like revenue, units sold, and profits. And in the educational world, you could take a similar statistical approach, but the quantifiables are completely different. The National Federation of High School Sports, they did a really amazing article called "The Case for High School Activities." It lists a participation of about 11 million high school students nationwide in their sports, their theater, their art, or debate programs. So if you're doing the math, it insinuates that 48 million of our roughly 59 million high school students aren't active in after school activities. In stark contrast, we see that 72% of students have some kind of participation level in the esports community. And that's men, women, males, females, or indifferent. I mean, there's a huge participation level in the esports industry from our students, whether that's streaming, discussing, or playing the games. So for an educational institution, it makes sense to engage students in a space that they're already engaging, because just like any other sport or activity, we see that students who get involved have a higher attendance rate. On average, that means that they're missing 1.5 days less of school than the unengaged student. We see study after study that engages students, that engages students within that space, that they're carrying a GPA that's 0.3 of a point higher than unengaged students. And that's not even getting into the fact that like SAT scores are 100 points higher with students who are playing sports or in an after school activity in each category, not collectively, but individually in each category. And I think moreover, we see that students get involved And moreover, when we see that students are getting involved in school activities, specifically like esports clubs, they're fostering a bigger STEM interest, and they're likely to further those interests through secondary education because they're already being successful. And when you look at this in future view, it means not only are you building your current community, not only are you building your school district for now, but when you consider that 30% of Americans stay close to home for the first 10 years after graduation, you're just bettering your community as a whole, not only your school, but the community around it.
So there's plenty of reasons, both on the individual and the institution side, and there's a ton of different options out there. So it sounds like even taking the first step can be a little bit overwhelming. So, Josh, can you talk a little bit about how a school can go about getting an expert on board to help align their technology purchases with their esports program goals?
Sure. So this is actually something that we do with Trox, right? We actually will sit through the process. We call it our DSA, our design service agreement, where we actually look at 6 major components of what make a successful program, right? And how to vet through that. You know, we look at the hardware aspect, but we also look at the team development, the league development. We look at the curriculum integration and how you're bringing that into facilities, spaces, giving the students an opportunity, right? From that standpoint, we look at the community, the marketing, the branding. We also help with the process of developing the roadmap, right? Of what the next 3 to 5 years look like, because this is, and at least in our, at least in the esports world, we hear this a lot. It's the Wild West, right? And yeah, it still kind of is, but we're actually starting to see it tame down a bit. We're actually seeing things solidify and paths being really sort of drawn out that we can now follow. Here is an industry, here is a career path, here is the opportunity for the students. So really, it's sitting down and actually talking through each one of these elements of what make a successful program. The club is a great place to start, but we feel, and we've seen programs that have had only a club, and it just sort of falls by the wayside, because what happens over time is it just becomes a club. It's not supported by anything else, and then just time passes. And so we feel that it is a full solution that every school must go through to look at it from start to finish, and all of those elements, from curriculum to even prepping the students through the process of competing in the leagues and getting them ready for colleges and universities. We work with over 120 colleges and universities across the U.S. developing their programs, and they're reaching out to us and saying, what high schools, what students are out there? How do we recruit? How do we enroll? Where do we find these individuals? There's means that exist out there now, and they're very, very crude in the process of I've got to search through Discord and YouTube and Twitch, and I got to try and vet through what this looks like. So there is in our process now is to talk high schools and even middle schools for that matter through the foundational understanding of what that looks like to build a successful program.
Yeah, it sounds like it's better to contact professionals than just shooting from the hip, because we'll be able to give you a better guidance through the process. We've
walked through it a dozen times, right? And so we want to take that knowledge and be able to help you navigate through really this titan of an industry. And it can seem very overwhelming at times. You just go on the internet and search for esports leagues. You're going to get hundreds of hits coming back. And where do you start? What's the best for my student? What meets all of the other questions in my why category, like why I want to bring it to our school. Like, how do you even vet through all of that? So, having that knowledge and that determination to walk you through each one of those steps is something that we enjoy doing a lot for schools. So
yeah, and it's a classic case of you don't know what you don't know.
That's correct.
So reach out. We may have thought of other things that you may not have. So we've talked about a lot of stuff, but I do have one final question. It kind of sets a little bit of the stage for another webinar that we have going on tomorrow. As we've talked about, gaming has become far more mainstream in the past couple decades. And yes, people still view it as a hobby, but it's changing course into something far bigger. So Eric, can you give us an idea of how does implementing esports into school help expand college and career opportunities for students moving forward?
Well, I think Josh was touching on it a little bit in his last response. Esports is now at the collegiate level, and there are large competitions, just like you have for basketball tournaments and college football playoffs. There are similar things going on for esports. And that means that those schools are looking for talent and they're starting to recruit. And there's a variety of ways to do that. But having an official structured team rather than a club type thing organization, and being involved in local tournaments and getting visibility for the school, which then gives visibility for the students, having those programs at the high school level that promote the talent on the team, whether it's an actual player or somebody involved in the production or shoutcasting of it, opens those people up, those students up to the college level esports programs and potential scholarships. And then beyond that, for career opportunities, it's like everything else we've been talking about. I've seen, for instance, people that have been in the early stages of esports, a player that kind of transitions into a host shoutcaster type person, because while they know the game, they're maybe not as good as some of the others, but they have a lot of personality and they broadcast. Now they're on stage at big events, the PC Gamer Show at E3, for instance, and other big, massively viewed events. League of Legends is watched by more people than watch the Super Bowl. And they're on stage broadcasting this, and it started from their passion for gaming. So the college next level for actual participation in esports and scholarships, as well as branching out into career opportunities, and that base fundamental, as we've all discussed about all of us, it all starts with our passion for the hardware that can lead you into so many different career fields.
Yeah, perfect. At this time, I want to open it up to some questions from the audience. So if you do have a question and have not already done so, please submit it to the panelists via the Q&A feature. We do have a question here from Corey Jackson. Is it better to go with a gaming server or just standalone gaming PCs for about 12 gamers?
So I'll just take on at least not the there's other considerations that you have to go through outside of the hardware that you really want to consider the cost. You're talking about network costs, you're talking about, multicasting traffic, you're talking about a lot that will have to be handled from that world, right? So, and we're also seeing cloud based gaming happening, right? Stadia and Amazon has their thing. It's one, there aren't titles on there, so that it's a ways away still. I mean, it's talked about, but true legitimate gaming competitions are not even looking at that yet. Like that's not really a major consideration for them. They've talked about it. I mean, I know a few professional teams, we've talked to some of them. It's really still the individual hardware that is best suited for them. But I'll let the two PC manufacturers talk through that.
So I think a bigger consideration too is really what game you're playing. So some games like League of Legends, you've got to boot up on a PXE server. So I mean, then you've got to have considerations about like who has rights. Are you infringing on those copyrights and those kinds of things? But I mean, certainly if you're playing games like Rocket League, I mean, you can literally boot that with an Asus router and throw that onto the 12 different machines that you have within the space. So I mean, to Josh's point, absolutely, there are a lot of considerations that you need to have within the hardware space. But you should also really consider the software and how you want to progress forward with that. And I mean, the other big thing that you want to do, and not to take away from Eric's answer that I'm sure he's going to have on this is, are you trying to be competitive or are you trying to be casual? You got to make that a really strong consideration for how you want to build forward.
Yeah, Ryan, we've never met previously, but you know me. um, that's exactly what I wanted to mention is, are you dipping your toe in, or are you purpose built? You don't buy a tool without knowing what you're going to use it for. And you have very specific tools for very specific tasks around the house or the construction site, et cetera, or in the garage. And so because funding is always limited, um, you got to really identify what you're trying to accomplish, as Ryan has stated multiple times, and um, identify the tool that is best for that, and not waste money by just getting something that's affordable, because it might end up not being a good tool at all. I guess is really the simple answer I'll give there.
So don't buy equipment and then shoehorn your program into the equipment. Buy the equipment for your program that you want.
Yeah,
bingo.
Well said.
Perfect. Another question here from Dustin Weigard. Generally speaking, how many schools across the nation have adopted esports into their schools, and how fast has it grown over recent years?
Those numbers change quite a bit because so if you're gauging it from the league standpoint, right? Like there's so many leagues that are out there, right? HSEL or NASIF or EGF, right? So you've got these leagues that exist out there, and then each one of them are sort of reporting their numbers, right? I think HSEL, from a club perspective, not necessarily all in on the competition side, but are at least part of the league and part of the hierarchy and structure of HSCL. It's I want to say last number was like 1,200 for that particular league, but I don't know how many of them are actually competing at the competition level. Maybe if Ryan and Eric know some of those specifics, but this is still from a true esports competition side. We're still an early adoption stage, is what we're seeing. It is still people just dipping their toe in and doing the casual gaming side of things, from a club perspective, and not really competing at true tournaments where there's tuition, scholarships, and all that kind of stuff that are being offered from that standpoint.
Ryan, Eric, you guys have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure.
I'll let Ryan go because I don't really have any data to share on that. So
okay, so HSCL, really awesome partner for Asus. They project that they've got about 3,500 different schools that are participating with HSCL. Now, whether those are active or competing in their national league, I can't share that data with you. However, I would say when you look at this in grand view, we see roughly about 5,000 different school districts in the United States that are participating in some kind of esports. I think the last statistical analysis that we took was about 70% of schools are considering or already have an esports program within their environment. So definitely in the early adoption stages, when you look at maybe 4,000 of those school districts that are involved versus the 28,000 public school districts in the United States. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. Just like Josh said, there's we're definitely in the early adoption stages here.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit earlier about perceptions and stigma, and Eric had a great answer for that one. But Fabian wants to know, what is the secret sauce, if you will, to change perceptions within school district administrators or teachers, as well as the parents, about the seriousness of esports? Is there any particular phraseology or analogies that you can bring up that will help turn that light bulb on for them?
Well, it's like I said before, all the benefits that come from it. But I had mentioned in my answer earlier that I had some examples, and Acer participates in or sponsors big esports events that are at hockey arenas, basketball arenas, things like that. Intel Extreme Masters, League of Legends, World Championships, things like that. And my interactions with the parents of the young kids that are there, the parents have no idea what's going on. That they know the kids are excited. They don't understand what the game is or why they'd be interested in watching it. But when they witness their young child interacting with other people with a similar interest, and how positive that community is, far more positive. I mentioned I was on a football team in high school. It wasn't always so positive there, but the esports community really is, and it's so accepting. So on the parent side, seeing that individual growth and kids come out of their shell, I've had parents almost in tears, literally, when they see their kids open up and be excited about something. Then you can build on that and talk about all the benefits that we've talked about in terms of the skill sets that are learned through the program. And then more recently, we talked about going to the next level in college, scholarships available in careers. I think the same thing for administration and teachers, but getting back to the multi-use purpose that Josh has keyed in on, how these powerful systems for esports are also powerful enough, and I mentioned it as well, for things like science, using virtual reality for biology and dissection, where some people might have a concern about cutting open an animal, cleanliness or waste, because you have to buy all these things. Now you're all doing it in virtual. Chemistry, it's safer to mix chemicals in a VR setting than to have them physically in front of the kids, where they could have a caustic reaction that burns people, plus the cost as well. So maybe there's a change in funds towards esports that can benefit all these other programs. Josh also mentioned the digital arts in the schools and things like that. So it's not just about fun. There's all these other benefits.
We do like to use the traditional sports model as much as possible, right? Today, if you're looking for the answer, like, well, how do we get over the stigma of this process? I say, well, are we sitting in our living rooms watching Sunday football with our favorite team? We're not involved in it. We're not playing on the field. We're not strapping up, booting up, getting out there, rolling up our sleeves, getting out and do it. But we have our favorite team. We root for it. It's a form of entertainment, right? It's a form of pastime. It's an entertainment side. But if you go back to like the early 1800s, football was not anywhere at the collegiate level where it is today, right? People are winning scholarships and getting scholarships, full rides because of football, basketball, a traditional sport. And so I think there's a time aspect too of really understanding, and once again, going to education, right? When you look at footballs at the late 1800s, it was a pastime. It was a hobby. It was something that they enjoyed doing. And I'm sure mom and dad back then were like, don't get involved in that goofy sport. It's going to go nowhere. I mean, you're just rolling around in the mud and you're just tossing a ball around. What's this football thing? And now if they were to see today, it's $1 billion industry. And just so you know, the esports and gaming industry is a $150 billion industry. So it's hard to sort of say that it's a nothing industry when you look at, I've got two manufacturers here that are selling a lot of hardware in the space, plus all the coding, plus all the software development, all the marketing, all the media. When you look at the industry, it is a massively growing industry.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, guys. Last question. If you could give us, in your opinion, what is one thing that our viewers should leave today with about how to build an esports program at their school? What is the key takeaway from today's webinar? Josh, let's start with you.
Develop for industry. Make sure your kids, your students understand there's a career path, an industry path. Educators understand there's a massive industry path, that it's giving and affording students a new opportunity for a career that they enjoy, very much so. Right? It's a different culture. It's a different generation. They receive content differently. They think differently. And so we want, if you're walking away from this, I say the biggest thing from our perspective is invest in the industry for the student for a successful career path.
Thank you. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, so I think very similar to Josh, very similar to Eric and Eric A and Eric P here. I think it goes without saying that most of us wouldn't be here without some kind of form of esports, right? For me, it was my grandfather almost 25 years ago teaching me DOS coding so that I could play Spider-Man on a 3.5-inch floppy. And what I mean to say here is that esports is such an amazing platform, and it's so impactful in a way to engage your students in something that interests them. But you have to also understand that esports can be an effective funnel to bring your students into STEM activities that they themselves might not otherwise consider. And I think with a solid partner like Asus has in Trox, setting goals up for you, your program, and your scholar athletes that everybody can objectively reach, you have nothing but success in building out an ecosystem. And shameless plug: when you need equipment, Asus is going to be here. Um, we're more than happy to help walk you through all of those different aspects with Trox.
Eric, what's your takeaway?
Do or do not. There is no dip your toe in. Set your goal, know what you want to do, and spend appropriately. You don't need to overspend, but don't underspend. Like I said earlier, make sure that you're planning for success and plan for the future. Make sure that you have systems that will last several years if you're going to spend that money now, and help kids through their career path at the school, in not just esports, but all the other programs as well.
Thank you, guys. We do have a few other questions that did not get answered. Those will be answered in an email that is sent out to the attendees, as well as the webinar recording. But I want to thank each of our panelists today for their participation, and everyone who did attend today's webinar. If you would like more information about what we talked about today, please visit the Trox resource page, which will be shared in the chat. Also, we hope to see you here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern for our next esports webinar, where we will be further discussing the benefits of esports and how it can help build career readiness. Thank you.